Hi there, biologists. Guess what? This is our last video of this year. Isn't that crazy? In this lesson, we're going to be learning about alternative types of selection. The last lesson we learned about natural selection, but that's not the only type of selection that occurs. We'll be learning about a few others. We're also going to be learning about what makes a species and how a species might branch out to become a new one. All right, have your packets out and let's get started. Unit 6, Lesson 3, Alternative Selections. So let's do a quick recap of what we've learned so far. We learned about natural selection. This is where nature selects the variations based off of what the environmental conditions are and which organism would be best adapted in that environment. And that these environments have abiotic and biotic resources that are the selection criteria. If those biotic or abiotic resources change, let's say a drought, which would limit water, we might see a change in what populations can survive there well. And of course, competition also is a drive for selection. How does selection breed change? So selection over time leads to speciation, and speciation is the event that gives rise to a new species. And there are two characteristics that we need to know that define what a species is, at least biologically. And it has to be able to create offspring that are both viable. Viable means able to survive and are healthy, and fertile, which means it can create an organism that or an offspring that is able to then also turn around and reproduce too. That one that's not infertile. Now, we have pictures of beetles. Look at all these different types of beetles. These are all mini species of beetles. They have enough changes in them that they do not, if they reproduce together, won't produce offspring that are both viable and fertile. So they've created specific species. But dogs are still one species because they can reproduce both viable and fertile offspring. So eventually, a population of a species will become so genetically or physically different from other populations that it may become either unrecognizable. For example, mate calls might be different, physical attributes, they don't even recognize that they're the same species, or impossible to breed. They can't produce a viable or fertile offspring. Some examples of this are ligers. Ligers are where tigers and lions have reproduced. This doesn't happen in the wild, but when we do see this, when we've seen this in zoos, the offspring are so weak they cannot survive without human help. So they would never survive in the wild. Frog calls are another example that a frog, even though it may look very similar, won't recognize another species because the call that would attract a mate to say, hey, we can reproduce is totally different. Mules is an example of what happens when it's just impossible to breed a viable or fertile offspring. We can breed donkeys and horses. Those are two separate species. But the offspring that we get, a mule, is not capable. It may be very strong. It has attributes of both, but it's sterile. It's infertile. It's not going to be able to produce any offspring. It will never have children. Now, new species are being discovered all of the time. We're constantly discovering those. We're exploring new areas. Remember, there's so many places in the ocean that we haven't explored. There's so many other places, like microscopically, that we haven't explored. And also physically similar organisms, we're finding once we are able to do some genetic testing that they're more different than we thought they were. And of course, we have more technology that allows us to explore more. We do have some differences within a species. The main vocab word that we're going to learn is sexual dimorphism. And this is when males or females of the same species have noticeable differences in physical appearances between sexes. And the word dimorphism, di means two, morph means changes. So it's sexual, two changes within the sexes of an organism. Now, there's some reasons why this happens. First off, it could be helpful to distract predators away from females in a nest. It also is maybe helpful with competition if you have males that have to physically compete and fight to, again, win a mate. Here's some examples that we see. For example, if you look at this duck, we have the more colorful male duck and the more camouflaged female duck. In the picture of these two fish, the one that has the black sort of additional to the tail is the male. With this picture of moose, we see that the moose have antlers. The male one does, the female does not. And sometimes the size is incredibly strange. If you look up here at the very top, we have an anglerfish. These are the fish that live in the really deep sea. And the male anglerfish is tiny in comparison to the female. And actually, to protect itself, it will, once it becomes, gets into adulthood and it's very tiny sort of thing, it will actually attach itself to the female for the rest of its life until they both die. Alternative types of selection. So far, we've done natural selection. That again is when nature is selecting based off of the uh, attributes of the environment. But we have another one. It's called sexual selection. And this is a mode of natural selection when one biological sex of a species chooses another to mate with, and competes with others of the same sex to mate with the opposite sex. And there's two types of this. We have intrasexual selection. This is where we see competition directly with others for a mate. It's usually violent. This is where two males are going at it, going, no, I'm going to mate with this female. No, I am going to. And usually whoever wins is the one that actually does the mating. And this usually is, again, male-male competition. We're going to remember this because against. So against, usually fighting, going directly against each other. I also want you to think of raw, like, like attacking. I know that sounds sort of funny, but hey, it's whatever helps you remember, right? Our next one, we have intersexual selection. This is the one where actually the female is choosing and the male is like dancing around and trying to get the attention of the female, or building a nest to attract the female, or doing a certain type of call to get the female's attention. And with this is not usually violent at all. The female will sort of look and be like, no, I'm interested, or nope, I'm not, I'm going to leave. And again, it's not usually violent. I want you to think of like, like, like I'm getting to choose this one or this one. Like you're sort of confusing and choosing, versus the other one, like, rah, I'm going to attack. All right. So I know that sounded sort of weird, but hey, again, whatever helps us remember. We have another one called artificial selection. The big ticket thing is humans are doing this. It's artificial. It's fake. It does not happen naturally. It would never happen naturally. So again, this is also called selective breeding because the humans are selecting the traits that we would like to breed. An example of this would be like a farmer choosing the best breed for future generations. That's usually what happens when you have a farmer that's breeding chickens or even plants or anything, that they're trying to yield the best results, what they want to sell. GMOs are an example of artificial selection. Scientists are choosing the traits that they would like to have shown, and then they're creating a seed or an organism that's then going to have those traits. Guess what is also artificial selection? Dog breeds are. So here's the thing, there are so many dog breeds out there that would not survive well in the real world. Example, pugs. Pugs are so cute. Bulldogs are so cute, but they have this like smushed up face that gives them horrendous respiratory issues. They can't run for very long. Their ability to pull oxygen from the environment is not great. They tend to get respiratory infections a lot. That's just one example. So we pick which characteristics we like because we think that they're cute, not based off of whether they're going to perform well if they were out on their own in the wild. We are almost finished. We just have our practice. We need to go on through and identify these images to see which one matches which. We're going to do the first three together, and then you're going to do the rest on your own. It's really important that you practice this because this is something that you're going to be having to do on your quiz. So you have a word bank. Let's get started. So the first three. In this first image, I have two wrens, and I have one that has been identified. The male is on the left. The female is very different from the male. What do we think is going to be this vocab word that best describes this, where we have two of the same species, but they look very different. It's going to be sexual dimorphism. In this middle picture, we have two kangaroos, and they are fighting. They're fighting over a mate. They're two male kangaroos fighting. What type of selection is this going to be? Think they're going against each other. Intrasexual selection. In this other image, we have a male that is doing a dance with several other males, and it's trying to attract a mate. Because we have some dancing involved, the female is choosing. It's going to be intersexual selection. All right, you're going to do the rest of them. You totally can do this. I believe in you. And that will be all of your notes for the Unit 6 packet. We're done, you guys. The end is in sight. I believe in you. Have a wonderful